Hello everyone, this is part 6 of What If Naruto Met Past Hinata, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. It was the longest 8 weeks of Hinata's life. Never before had she experienced such torments. Pregnancy made any training or mission look, literally, like an afternoon stroll. The slight nausea of earlier had erupted into full-blown morning sickness. Before 11 o'clock she couldn't keep anything down. She was tired constantly and seemed to do nothing but eat, and when she wasn't eating she was restless, and then she was tired, and when she was tired, she ate. And what might she have eaten besides the ridiculous food she craved daily? Watermelon, caramels, obscure vegetables, and at one time she swore she would if she didn't have a fried banana right that very second. She had never even had a fried banana before, but that didn't really seem to stop her from making Naruto take the trip out the grocer so she could make it herself. At midnight, it was such a blessing to be able to cook. She made him one too, of course, but it appeared he had gone straight to bed after returning home with the bag of fruit, still in his house shoes and only half on Hokage's robe. Auto FN, I have to admit, this image makes me laugh. But she was so miserable at the time she was far beyond caring about other people, so she had broken apart the banana with her fingers before eating it with satisfaction. Until she threw up again and began to cry, to which Naruto responded by groggily slamming open the bathroom door to hold her hair back in true Naruto fashion, full of chivalry and clumsiness. But Naruto never complained. He complied with every demand, though sometimes with a tired smile, and did his best to stay out of her way when she gave off the aura of, "You did this to me and by God you will pay." So the weeks had passed, dragging on, but passing nonetheless without much of any kind of incident, unless you count the swarms of people who seemed attached to Hinata anywhere she dared to go. Flocks of men and women with sacks of goods and food, ladies flooding out of shops badgering her with homemade remes and wives' tales of how to alleviate just about any pregnancy ailment, all of which Sakura severely recommended against. By herself, Sakura was enough of a walking medical book. She was constantly checking up on Hinata, issuing detailed instructions about street and proper exercise for pregnant women, especially important for kunoichi who may have unknowingly sustained an internal injury during combat. These were the times Hinata wished with all her heart she had the courage to just saying, "Screw you." You try having the mentality of a low self-esteem ridden girl who is thrust into the future and lands, face down, in a pile of Naruto-induced pregnancy. Of course she'd never, ever say anything like that. She only accepted the advice, and to be honest, it did help. But, the lingering feeling of happiness in the pit of her stomach, the swell of glee when she saw Sakura and Haru and knew, at least at the moment, she would one day possess that was better than any trick or stunt. Hinata can definitely say it was pleasant to an extent, but she was more than happy when things began to finally settle down, or at least go back to the slightly dysfunctional road to normalcy they'd formerly been occupying. And there was no doubt in Hinata's mind that this was making her stronger in ways she never even deemed possible. But for the people Naruto cared about, nothing was ever easy. "Naruto, you forgot your bento." Hinata rushed out of the house, hastily shoving muddy boots to the side of the door with a roll of her eyes. It was the second time that weak Naruto had walked out without his lunch or really much of anything. These days he seemed to be lost in his own skin, ambling around with something similar to confusion plastered to his face. With a small sigh of relief she saw him turn his head over his shoulder, foot pausing just over the division of the yard and the dusty street. "Ah," he said, turning fully to face her as she came hesitantly towards him. "Make sure you eat it today. I don't want you hungry during that big meeting," she said, pushing the cloth-wrapped box into his hands. He nodded briskly, receiving the food before his face fell slightly. With the "Oh crap." She shook her head and laughed a little. "The proposition groups for international squads," she answered, touching his hand to gain his wandering attention. "Look at me, Naruto." With a sheepish grin he did as he was told, staring straight into her eyes. "You'll do fine, be yourself. Nothing to be nervous over," she stated quietly, watching as that Naruto determination settled over his features. With a low chuckle he swooped down and pecked her on the lips, eyes lingering over her stunned ones. Ah, she gasped, grabbing her mouth, to which Naruto only beamed mischievously. That's for your hypocrisy, he declared, laughing as he landed another kiss on her forehead, watching in sheer amusement as she hastily grabbed the bangs curtaining her face and blushing skin. Quote. And that was because the villagers are watching. What? Why? Hinata suddenly screeched, watching in disbelief as Naruto walked away, still laughing. Naruto had yet again stolen a kiss. Because, he said, turning on the street, holding up his bento, I have the prettiest wife in Konoha, and I can't waste any opportunities. If I did, you might leave. In a wave of laughter from the small group of people on the street, Naruto disappeared, the crowd aware of itself dispersing as well, leaving nothing but the emptiness of early morning and the shimmering sunlight through the trees. Oh gracious, Hinata mumbled, her face cherry red. With a nervous smile she quickly turned and began walking as fast as she was able into the house, trembling from all the excitement. Glad to see you're enjoying yourself, Hinata-san. Hinata stopped halfway to the door, her body instantly stiffening. The voice was cold, so cold and so familiar. Foreboding seated itself in her stomach, shattering the embarrassing, but beautiful moments of before. Kaori, Hinata whispered, refusing to turn around. She knew as soon as she did all her reserve would falter. A sick smirk weaved its way across the shallow features of the Hyuga's personal messenger dog. Such a pleasure to be with you once again. A pale hand stroked the back of Hinata's just so. Leave. Hinata barely recognized her own voice as she fisted her hands into her dress, shivering. Or what? The voice cooed mockingly, trailing its freezing fingers down her back. Each touch was like a knife slamming into her through the fabric and Hinata could barely stifle her cry as the hand settled on her hip. Oh, or I'll scream, and Naruto will come back. She breathed, shuddering. All at once, as soon as it had begun, Kaori retreated and Hinata found herself alone, still staring at the front door. Such a pity. I was hoping to have more fun before taking you to your father. Hinata let out a quavering breath and blinked away the tears that had pinned themselves to the back of her eyes. There was a subtle satisfaction in Kaori's obvious fear of Naruto's name, and though Hinata did not know their potential history, she could assume whatever encounters the two had experienced were not of the pleasant kind. Kaori was a madly jealous type, but he was weak in strength. Once, he might have been kind, but years of tea under the strict upper classes of Hyuga politics had broken whatever goodness in him he might have had, worn him into a sick puppet of sorts that took only the utmost gladness in the suffering of others. His will had slowly shifted with those of the elders, his goals for the good of the clan. Loosely translated, he had stopped at nothing to torment the branch families and, despite the modern times fast approaching, had remained firm with the old values of centuries ago. But he had not always been so vile. When they were children, Kaori and Hinata had often been inseparable. They were both small and less than accomplished with their training and often put down due to their inability to advance with Neji and the others. They were both main house members, pure bloods, though Kaori was much less than Hinata and an even less capable fighter. Still, Kaori had once been the only friend Hinata had possessed, but times had shifted and Hinata's heart had somehow remained untarnished while Kaori's corrupted, and the only feeling lingering was a warped possessiveness over her that had not faded. What are you doing here? Hinata said weakly, turning around. His pale eyes narrowed, the dark hair fastened in two long tails down his back rustling as he folded his hands within the silk sleeves of his kimono. Your father wishes to speak with you about. A flick of his eyes down her form, your current condition. Hinata's blood froze. Of course. There was no way her father could not have known. News traveled like lightning within the village and the Hyuga were more than perceptive to any change in the balance of things. And now, and what if I refuse? Hinata exclaimed sharply, suddenly overcome with the urge to protect the freedom she felt at present, the feeling of not having to please anyone but herself, to be alive for once. Kaori chuckled, but his eyes probed hers menacingly. He told me you would say that. He also told me to remind you of a promise if it were to happen. He let his eyes hood under his long lashes, or should I say, a term of contract. Hinata's heart beat rapidly under her dress, fighting its way out of her chest. There was no telling what her father truly wished to speak of, no way of understanding his motives. Although, Because of Kaori's amused expression, she was beginning to form some sort of gruesome picture. Then please, kindly remind me of his dirty manipulations, Hinata said somewhat weakly, protectively holding a hand on her stomach. Kaori grinned. With pleasure. He drew a scroll from his robe, and although Hinata had never before seen it in her life, something within her started. A flare of fury she couldn't begin to recognize. A single spark of her future self. Kaori, watching her reaction with satisfaction, opened it with finesse before reading over it once briefly. Please, Hinata pleaded, the amount of desperation in her voice making him look at her quizzically before reading with a stoic voice. It was decided as retribution for the Hyuga clan that if the union between a Hyuga Hinata and one Uzumaki Naruto were to commence without the interference of the council, then all legal position and influence within the clan be relinquished, and that any healthy child born with the traits of Hyuga descent be turned over to the clan for treatment deemed necessary to protect and retain peace within the clan by Lord Hiashi or the High Council as it is seen fit. Hinata felt her legs starting to collapse as she stared at Kaori, his own face stretching with each word, trailing off upon seeing his task completed most thoroughly. A wonderful agreement, I must say, though terribly selfish of you, Hinata. To think, handing over your child to the hand that fed you, the very one you bit. Ironic, isn't it? Hinata could not find words. Take me to my father, she gasped, jerking forward, take me to him. Hiashi sat within the room, enclosed in a shell of paper and slender wood. His eyes were set firmly upon the door, distant footsteps lingering in the hallway occupying his mind. The cup of tea in his hand was long forgotten, save for the slight warmth building between his cold fingers. He had not spoken to Hinata for a very, very long time, and now he was about to bring about the only shred of control he had left of her life, her child. Within his own heart he knew that he should not be doing what he was. She had made it painfully evident she did not want to be associated with him by any means last time, but it was for the good of the clan. His stony eyes narrowed in accordance. Until the day he was too feeble to lead, he would see that the good of the clan was always the priority, even if it meant causing harm to his own daughter yet again. Hiashi-sama. The formidable man lifted his head in acknowledgement as Kaori opened the door, stepping aside to reveal his eldest daughter. She was pale as a sheet, her hands held stiffly in front of her. Such garb, did you not give her time to change into something suitable? Hiashi stated dryly, surveying the deep blue dress with distaste. Hinata stared at him, eyes wide. Kaori smirked, watching the interaction with amusement. She insisted that you two speak immediately, Hiashi-sama. Hinata's father nodded, though still displeased, and resumed his staring at Hinata with a sort of sterile thoughtfulness. Thank you, you may leave us, he added, as though Kaori's presence was merely a second thought. Looking slightly irked, Kaori gave Hinata a final once-over before retreating, his robe swishing as he closed the door on the two. Please, sit. Hiashi's cold voice hit Hinata with the force of two swords clashing on the field. She slowly lowered herself down, thankfully separated by her father's desk. Tea. He gestured at his own cup and Hinata blinked at him slowly. Such formalities, it's as though you want me here, she whispered, Hiashi dropping his hand slowly back onto the desk. You are still aware of the policy dictated to you, hopefully by Kaori? He asked slowly, eyes narrowing in the dim light filtering through the paper walls. Hinata dropped her own eyes to her lap. Such displays in front of anyone who would have cared to listen. I am beyond horrified at the precautions you took to get me to come at your beck and call, like an ornery little girl. Hiashi breathed in slowly through his nose, a weighted pause settling over the two. It is not my pleasure to do this to you. I do not find any enjoyment from this, contrary to what you may have been told by your husband. Leave Naruto out of this, Hinata hissed. Hiashi felt the reserves of petulant annoyance grow behind the back of his tea. It is too far gone to simply ignore the man you married, Hinata. The council's blind eye has been switched off due to your pregnancy, and you would do well to submit to the demands we've established. Hiashi's voice was gruff, as though he was speaking to a naughty child instead of a grown woman. Still, he began again, letting the irritation ebb away, I do not wish for this to be an inconvenience on either part, though it is necessary. His eyes settled onto Hinata, stern in their argument, there can be no ignorance on the subject, Hinata, the child you will have must be turned over. Why are you so interested? He will not be of pure blood, so why should you waste your valuable time? Hiashi cut her off with the slamming of his hands on the desk. It is exactly that reason that I must devote such attentions, he said lowly, glaring at her. Because of your marriage our clan's secrets are at the mercy of anyone who may want them, and you no longer have the right of protection that this clan offers. I am only willing to overlook those circumstances because of the agreement you made, but I will not have the safety of my family SD for one mutt of a child. No Hyuga will be compromised due to your immaturity. Is that what you think this is? Hinata trembled, staring at her father. An immature decision. That's the reason I must submit my child to the coldness you call a family. Hinata felt the tears come down her face as she cried out to her father, to have my son because of who he is. Hiyashi's cold eyes softened, but his voice retained the same stern ringing in her ears. Your children will always be tormented because of who they are. You were aware of this fact the moment you married Naruto Uzumaki. Hinata set her eyes firmly on her father. Naruto is twice the man you will ever wish to become, and my children will be proud to be called his, the children of the greatest Hokage. Hiashi blinked and sipped his tea. But he will not ever be a Hyuga. No matter what he accomplishes, blood will always be thicker than water. He paused and stared into his glass, or wine. All at once, Hinata realized it. The true reason. No, she whispered suddenly. No, you can't do this. Hiashi lifted his eyes. They were all emotion evaporated. It must be done. You were prepared for this day, and now it has come. Hinata felt herself dissolving. Why do you do this to me? She whimpered. After all I have done to win your meager attention. After everything I did, why must you do this? Take away the one thing I could finally call mine. Her cries mounted as the reality settled over her shoulders. Why must you seal my son like this? As if he is yours. It was not my choice, Hinata. I attempted to convince you that marrying Naruto Uzumaki would undoubtedly end in your suffering, to make it clear that you were sacrificing more than yourself at the expense of an irrational infatuation, but you have always been weak, and you have always disappointed me. He paused, watching her cry. You are dishonoring your child with this tantrum. He will become a capable shinobi under Hyuga guidance. I'm sure some of Naruto's ability must be in his veins. He will not be entirely useless. No, Hinata said, lifting her head. No, he will be broken. He will be told he will never be good enough for you. Nothing is ever enough. You look at my cousin and see nothing. Nothing. Your sister was enough, only because you whittled her down. Her spirit is gone. I saw her in the hall, she is a shadow of the sister I knew. Hiashi watched her rise and stare down at him, eyes wet with tears still unshed. How could you? She whispered, anger reduced to intense sorrow. How could you call yourself our father, when never once did you love me or her? I only want what is best for you and the clan. Then want me. Hinata cried suddenly, holding her chest. Want me. For all I am, and all I am not. Until you can be happy with that, until you can love what I give to you, you will never have me willingly. She panted, slowly becoming composed again. She wiped away her remaining tears and for a moment, she appeared distant. Hiashi surveyed her curiously as she relaxed, closing her eyes and inhaling. I thank God for the person I will become. She whispered, I thank Naruto, I thank Kurenai-sensei. I thank everyone. I even thank you, father. With that, she departed and Hiashi was left, sitting downcast at his desk. With a sigh, he rose and saw Hanabi waiting expectantly outside his door. Was that sister? She asked, her voice composed. Hiashi stared at his daughter for the longest time. He steeled his eye and folded his hands into his sleeves, but for a moment, his reserve wavered. Bring me Tetsuya. It is time for you to learn. Hinata did not know what she was doing, crossing through the streets in the middle of the afternoon. She only knew she had to reach the only place she felt she could go, the one place she had ever felt at home. She climbed the stairs slowly, leaning on the rail, and was thoroughly exhausted by the time she reached the door at the end of the hall. She knocked. Once. Twice. Finally, the door opened and a small head peered up at her. Hinata Haim. A pause. Mama. Someone's at the door. Hi. The familiar voice was low and sweet as it approached the door, and Hinata felt herself start crying again. Hinata-chan, what's wrong? Hinata didn't reply, but launched herself into the arms she'd needed to feel around her. those arms she'd always run to, the arms she'd even been sent to. Those arms that had always been willing, no matter what, or who she was, or who she wasn't. Kurenai, she sobbed, burying her face in her former sensei's shoulder. Kurenai, what am I going to do? That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.